Hello, denizens of the internet. Today we're going to start on a bit of a historical archaeology challenge, and this is during one of the harsher times in our collective world history, World War II. We're going to start this journey on November 11th, 2021. I started recording the footage for this journey on what we call here in Canada Remembrance Day, also known elsewhere as Armistice Day as well. Almost everyone who's grown up in Canada, USA, or possibly even worldwide has heard this recited every year. So to start the journey, we'll start with a poem, In Flanders Fields by John McCrae from Guelph, Ontario, Canada. In Flanders fields the poppies blow, between the crosses row on row, that mark our place, and in the sky the larks still bravely singing fly, scarce heard amid the guns below. We are the dead. Short days ago we lived, felt dawn, saw sunset glow, loved and were loved, and now we lie in Flanders fields. Take up our quarrel with the foe. To you from failing hands we throw. The torch be yours to hold it high. If ye break faith with us who die, we shall not sleep, through poppies grow in Flanders fields. So, what does World War II have to do with this project? Well, Melissa of CauseTube channel So Biased, Lindsay from Thistle and Stitches, and Ayana from the Vintage Guidebook have issued this particular challenge. Not only to challenge ourselves, but I also take it as a means to understand the difficulties that sewists, both domestic and commercial, had to work with in this make and make do era, with government regulations and rations on fabric and materials. First, a bit of history. Things such as leather, nylon, or silk were in extreme short supply, and they were needed for uniforms, powder bags, parachutes, and other textiles on the front lines during the war. Almost every manufacturer was needed to work on these textiles, garments, or hospital materials that were needed throughout the war, and everyone needed to use ration coupons to buy a limited amount of fabric or garments each year. Food, alcohol, clothing, gasoline, and raw materials were all rationed, and this was done in many countries throughout the war, and Canada was no exception. One of the key differences with Canada is that our ration booklets were printed in English as well as French. Raw materials were expensive too, so the make and make do movement also helped to keep costs down by repairing rather than buying new. There was even documentation by the government advising people of what the maximum price stores were allowed to sell items such as food and materials were, and for anyone caught scalping on these prices or trying to sell items that were not exchanged for the tokens were heavily fined, or you were even sentenced to some jail time. Now, these regulations helped to prevent the inflation during the war. Knitting socks, scarves, mittens, or hats for the war effort were encouraged, and this is for people of any gender or age who had the skills, for people of all genders in terms of the garment who would be wearing them, as well as people were encouraged to learn how to knit for the war effort as well as for home use. The Red Cross has even published booklets with patterns for the average person at home to follow along and knit. The knitting fiber was also rationed, so you had to be careful on how you made your home knitting items stretch. So this would be by making hems for sweaters shorter, or for shortening the sleeves, or making them more fit snugly, or even just making items that used lace techniques. One little factoid for you fine folks is that knitting was eventually illegal to send overseas because of the risk of sending encoded messages in the knitted item. Now, however, the knitting booklets are available for download on wartimecanada.ca for free. If you would like to do some knitted wartime historical archaeology for yourself, you may also be able to find them in other places such as archive.org, ravelry.com. There's a ton of different resources out there that are for free. Also, keep in mind that Melissa has posted the restrictions for yarn use for those of you who are entering this challenge as a knitter. For those following this challenge, be sure to visit the link on the Google Drive for details in the description box, as well as other links for resources, as well as the various YouTubers who I've already mentioned that have issued the challenge for this project. I may do a small knitting project if time allows during this challenge, but for now, on to the rest of the history. Households were sent booklets on how to save money, where to buy local, and how to do their part to ensure supplies could be sent overseas to support the war effort, how to make do and mend, how to survive by getting creative with the use of food and materials, as well as how to reuse what they could, even including paper. Warning for you, parts of this next segment is going to get heavy, so just bear with me. So what does this have to do with the project at hand and the current challenge? As we wade our way through the new 20s of this century, we're faced with all sorts of our own challenges. We have the current climate crisis to start, where we're experiencing the hottest temperatures we have ever seen, where half the country's on fire each summer, and I'm not gonna lie, seeing forest fire smoke in Toronto is a little bit disturbing. We still have discrimination against Jewish people, and there's constantly reports of anti-Semitism in the news locally. We also have still racism and discrimination or marginalization of BIPOC people, as well as the marginalization and discrimination against people who are in the LGBTQ communities, or as well as those who are disabled. Most people currently don't earn a living wage enough to pay rent, let alone to contemplate buying a house, or let alone buy food and you have to have a side hustle to survive, with yet again another looming forewarning of inflation. We also have the global plague of 2020 that has caused all sorts of chaos, and it's, well, still going, much like how the diseases such as tuberculosis, polio, whooping cough, and smallpox were still running rampant during war times. I have even had a family member that was a polio survivor and had long-term symptoms until the day that they passed. People on social assistance also have to live with multiple roommates just to live and can't live on their own because they do not get enough assistance from the government. And billionaires just keep getting richer and the poor just either stay poor or become even more broke. So, what can we do about this? Now, I know that this method won't fix the economy, but we can take this as an example from history and make do. We can learn to fix things ourselves to extend the life of things that we already have, buy scraps on the cheap and mend our own clothing, and even possibly making it look cool using visible mending techniques. We can also learn how to ration our own fabric use what we have in our stash, make clothes that will last instead of buying fast fashion garments that you can only buy on the internet that lasts only one wash. I would suggest getting fabrics where possible that will biodegrade. Or if you do use fabrics and garments that are synthetic, make it so that they'll last and don't need to be washed as frequently. If you do have to use synthetics, you can reuse or recycle that material into something new. If your garments are too big, learn how to take them in so they fit you better. If you have a hole, patch it up before it gets worse to keep it out of the landfill. If it's too small, either donate it if you can or splice other pieces from other worn out garments into your current wardrobe so that you can help it to fit again. We can make do and mend. The general sewing rules are as follows. The materials that are allowed are cotton, rayon, and wool. What is not allowed is no silk, no nylon, or leather. No metal buttons, no zippers, no hook and eye closures, no snaps, or really any metal to be honest. No lace, no embroidery, no bows, no braids, no ruffles, or non-functional buttons. So at the end of the day, we might be going with either shell plastic or wood buttons here. Also, there will not be any elastic allowed, and no more than 4 meters, metric, of total stitching for the skirts or for the skirt portion of a dress. Now, keep in mind that the rules aren't prescriptive, so if you do need to go with what you have at home, that's fine. This is meant to be as a challenge to use as little materials as possible and to make do with what you already have. And any style or any era, or as well as any skill level, is welcome to join. There are other restrictions for each type of garment, and we'll go into those as we sew along. The deadline for the challenge overall is by May 8th, which is Victory Day in Europe. This is the back piece. I have it lined up on the side.
I have zero wiggle room.
I can honestly say I don't think I've ever worked with fabric this tight in terms of fit or the amount before. This is gonna be interesting.
Or I could be just absolutely talking out of my ass and not know what I'm talking about. We'll see.